It's May 11th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's plan to lower the national crisis level for COVID-19. President Yoon will address the nation in the coming hour on lowering the level to alert from the current serious. The 7-day mandatory quarantine period is expected to be downgraded to 5 days. The U.S. Consumer Price Index last month was down for the 10th straight month. Signs of inflation cooling down are raising expectations of a possible rate freeze. Google says its AI chatbot Bard is available to the public in 180 countries and also in the Korean language. The public debut comes just over a month after the tech giant launched the service. South Korea is set to lift its COVID-19 self-quarantine mandate, taking one of the last few remaining steps back to the complete pre-pandemic normalcy. During a meeting set to be presided over by President Yoon at 9:30 a.m., health authorities are expected to announce a set of eased COVID-19 protocols, including scrapping the 7-day isolation period for people with the virus. Also to be included is downgrading the country's alert level from the current serious to cautious and adjusting the infectious disease level from the second highest, Class 2, to the lowest, Class 4. Authorities could also eliminate the mask mandate in medical facilities. Now, once announced, the eased measures will likely go into effect later this month or in early June. President Yoon will hold a bilateral summit with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau next Wednesday in Seoul, upon the 60th anniversary of their diplomatic relations. South Korea's top office announced that the Canadian leader will arrive for a 3-day official visit next Tuesday, following Yoon's trip to Canada last September. The occasion will be a chance for the two countries to share their vision for future cooperation, according to spokesperson Lee Do-eun. He added that the leaders will also celebrate the history of friendship and cooperation between the two countries based on their shared universal values such as freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Over in the U.S., the inflation slowed for a 10th consecutive month in April, now leading to questions if the Fed will freeze the rate at their next policy meeting. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
According to the U.S. Labor Department's Consumer Price Index released on Wednesday, U.S. consumer prices rose 4.9% on year, down from the 5% reported in March. The latest numbers show that the U.S. is seeing inflation slowing for a 10th straight month, a huge decline from its 40-year high of 9.1% seen last June. April's inflation figure is also the smallest yearly increase since April 2021. On a monthly basis, however, consumer prices have increased 0.4%, following a 0.1% increase in March. The latest inflation figures come on the back of another drop in grocery bills, which offset a rebound in gasoline costs. Gasoline prices in April jumped 3%, while grocery prices dropped for a second straight month. Despite the mixed figures, there are signs that inflation is continuing to cool. And these signs are making economists wonder whether the U.S. Federal Reserve is finally ready for a rate freeze in their next FOMC meeting in June. The U.S. Central Bank has previously indicated that it will take into account future economic indicators, such as inflation and employment trends, as well as April's CPI, before it makes its decision on the key interest rate. Bloomberg noted that with clear signs of inflation easing, the U.S. Fed has room to freeze its rates in the next FOMC meeting. However, other watchers are less optimistic, as inflation levels are still far from the U.S. Central Bank's target of 2%. The U.S. Fed earlier this month raised its key interest rate by another 25 basis points, the 10th consecutive time that rates were raised. The next FOMC meeting is slated for June 13th to the 14th. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
Google's AI chatbot, known as Bard, is now available for use by the public in English, Korean, and Japanese in 180 countries. The official launch comes as Google looks to rival Microsoft-backed ChatGPT. BARD is equipped with Palm 2, a new language model with improved multilingual reasoning and coding capabilities, capable of supporting more than 100 languages. Now, just like ChatGPT, BARD uses AI to provide human-like conversational responses when prompted by a user. And Google says it aims to provide the service in 40 languages in the near future. Prolonged rocky diplomatic Seoul-Tokyo ties have stretched out to economic relations as well. What efforts should be made to ensure that economic relations reach their full potential? For more, we turn to Professor Oh Jun-seok from Sookmyung Women's University. Good morning, Professor.
Morning.
Now, the two leaders of Seoul and Tokyo, Yoon and Kishida, agreed to further stabilize the semiconductor supply chain through cooperation between South Korea's chip manufacturing businesses and Tokyo's chip materials, parts and equipment companies. Professor, what kind of cooperation can we expect from the two sides? I mean, any detailed project or plans can we look forward to?
After the summit meeting, they agreed to expand economic cooperation. They made a promise to take the cooperation up to the next level by stabilizing the supply chain of semiconductor, batteries, and electric vehicles, and by carrying out digital transformation between the two countries. Somewhat differently, in the focus of forward-looking cooperation, President Yoon stressed on the restoring normalization of relations, while Prime Minister Kishida stressed more on the improving movement of semiconductor investment. It's noteworthy, Korea's business lobby groups expressed suggestions to boost cooperation for resource development partnership in third countries. In the field of advanced technologies as collaboration, the two countries could address such global agendas as supply chain, energy, and climate changes. Korean companies in the material parts and equipment sectors wish for frictionlessly smooth trade between two countries. Japan stands ahead in the original technology. Lots of mutual benefits could be got when Korean companies take the parts and materials produced by Japanese counterparts to manufacture products for conglomerates that are then exported. Let's not forget that this meeting and discussion are not the end, but just a start. It'll take more time for creating shared prosperity to be materialized into a specific business project. We have to wait and see.
Right, taking baby steps one at a time. Now, the thing is, though, Professor, still some economic hurdles between the two countries linger, namely the issue of the so-called whitelist. When do you think Japan will return South Korea to its favorable trading partner list? Will it be anytime soon? When could the timeline be?
Yeah, good point. And yes, the sooner better. Economy-wise, it's apparent. Restoring normal trade relationship would be mutually beneficial for high-tech industries, including semiconductors. Why? Time and timing is the core of competitiveness in this field. Diplomacy-wise, a beacon light sending signal. With the announcement of a solution for forced labor during the Japanese colonial period, cooperation of economic diplomacy has begun in earnest. Tangent point of economy and diplomacy is restoring wide country status, as you mentioned. Prime Minister Kishida confirmed that the Japanese government was in the process of reinstating Korea to its wide list of trusted trading partners, conferring preferential export treatment. The two leaders agreed to make joint efforts, and Japan's decision to put Korea back onto the white list will bring a greater synergy for the industry. Joint research in advanced technology sectors will also be expected, including space technology, quantum technology, and artificial intelligence. In short, the recent bilateral summit has opened things up for improvement, so we can now anticipate cooperation between the two countries in the industries, and this will contribute to the forward-looking regional growth.
Right. Now, some experts are saying that Tokyo might add Seoul back on its whitelist after the G7 summit. Are you on the same page?
The diplomacy has two approaches. The one is belligerent competition in the form of economic war or trade battle, and the other is a mutual cooperation, that of economic partnership or multilateral FTA. Solidifying economic partnership, especially among G7 countries, is always better alternative because it's a gain-taking game among other member countries, while economic war is only a painstaking game. President Yoon underscored the normalcy of bilateral relations, that Korean semiconductor manufacturers and excellent Japanese subsidiaries can build a solid semiconductor supply chain together. President Yoon has requested the Japanese equipment companies to invest in new semiconductor investment worth 300 trillion won in the metropolitan area of Korea. I suppose now comes the time of negotiation. Korea-Japan FTA might be on the table. Once stopped in 2009, a global supply chain came to make a transformation into regional supply chain within economic bloc such as G20, a lesson for risk inflation from the COVID-19 supply disruption. In this sense, Korea and Japan could further materialize cooperation on the global issues.
Right. And before we let you go, Professor, the inaugural session of an economic security dialogue took place, focusing on enhancing supply chain resiliency and energy security. Now, that sounds pretty new. How effective will this dialogue be for the two countries to actually move forward?
Once again, globalization has made a transition into the regionalization. So in that sense, now is the time of a regional bloc, and then risk insulation is very, very important. In this sense, it is a beginning of the Korean and Japan as a type of regional integration in terms of supply chain. So in this sense, Korea and Japan could further materialize cooperation in the issues such as public health, energy, and climate changes.
Right. All right. Thank you, Professor Oh. Thank you so much again for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
President Yoon Suk-yeol marks his first year in office this week. Beefing up the economy has been on the top of his to-do list. Our Lee Dae-hyun looks back at the past year.
With a clear focus on freedom, innovation, fairness, and solidarity, the Yoon administration has been working on creating a private sector-led economy over the past year.
정부 주도가 아닌 민간 중심의 경제로 전환하여 일자리를 창출하고 중산층을 더욱 두텁게 할 것입니다.
The first step, boosting businesses. The Yoon administration has been working to ease more than 170 business regulations and 140 disciplinary measures by listening to the voices of frontline workers. It sought an increase in business investments by cutting corporate taxes, providing more tax credits for national strategic technologies, and temporary investment tax incentives. Next, innovation in the public sector. With a sound fiscal policy in mind, the government tightened the purse strings as the national budget bill had increased 5.1% this year from 2022. It has also focused on efficiency by reorganizing public institutes to reduce unnecessary quotas and expenses. The Yoon administration has also been proactively adopting an emergency framework to ease market concerns, including expanding the market liquidity public fund program amid volatile bonds and funds markets. 13 emergency economic meetings and over 20 ministerial roundtables were held to tame market fears. In terms of the housing market, it has eased some home loan regulations while abolishing tax penalties on multiple homeowners. Last but not least, the current administration is working to increase public welfare by protecting vulnerable groups. Despite global inflation, the country's inflation is back to the 3% level after 14 months and down from a peak of 6% last July. And it has reached an all-time high employment rate as well. Measures including lowering fuel taxes, providing energy vouchers, and expanding tariff rate quota on energy and food were also rolled out. Welfare expenses for low-income households rose 12% from the previous year. However, some concerns remain. Sluggish exports in the IT sector remain amid a drop in chip demand. Consumer prices, too, are still above the government's target, with fears lingering due to external factors such as commodity prices. One expert has some advice on the task the administration should focus on.
Other countries, for example, are using their budget to resolve the energy crisis while responding to industrial policy competition. The IRA and the US CHIPS Act are examples the South Korean government could look to.
He also agreed with how the government urged the importance of improving the market paradigm, such as nurturing talent and in creating a flexible industry ecosystem following industrial shifts. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
And the Yoon administration's industrial policy has been focusing on building up domestic high-tech industries to produce cutting-edge technologies as future growth engines. Shin Ha-young has more.
For the past year, the Yoon administration has been putting in efforts to nurture high-tech industries and has been making reforms to boost investment.
첨단 산업은 핵심 성장 엔진이자 안보 전략 자산이고 우리 일자리와 민생과도 직결되고 있습니다.
In line with its goal, last October, it identified 12 national strategic technologies, including chips, secondary cell batteries, and robotics, and decided to invest 25 trillion Korean won, or roughly $18.8 billion. Support for semiconductor chips, the country's major economic driver, has been particularly noticeable amid global competition to take the lead in the chip industry. The government earlier announced its plan to make the Seoul metropolitan area home to what would be the world's biggest hub for making system chips. It has also taken steps to support corporate activities through tax benefits. Through the so-called K-Chips Act, the tax deduction rate for conglomerates and medium-sized businesses in selected tech industries has risen from 8% to 15%, while for smaller businesses, it has risen from 16% to 25%. Boosting operations and exports of nuclear power plants has been also on the agenda under the goal to make the country a nuclear reactor superpower. Construction will soon resume at the Shinano nuclear power plant on reactors 3 and 4, which were halted in 2017 under the previous government's nuclear phase-out initiative. In terms of artificial intelligence, the government decided to spend around $300 million this year in spending infrastructure to develop AI. It also plans to nurture 10,000 software companies in the service sector at the center of an AI ecosystem by 2026. There were also remarkable achievements in the space industry, with the country's successful second launch of its homegrown Nuri space rocket, making it the 7th country in the world to have developed a space launch vehicle that can carry a satellite of more than a ton. This was followed by its first lunar orbiter Danori, which successfully entered its target orbit of the moon. On top of that, there are plans to establish a National Aeronautics Administration, or Korean version of NASA, within this year. One expert said the Yoon administration's early moves have encouraged investment.
Delays in legislation and policy making hinder firms from investing. But over the past year, various policies were made regarding advanced industry strategies, reducing uncertainties for the firms. They've also absorbed a significant portion of investment risks.
He added that the government should continue to engage with the private sector through effective communication channels so that companies can better accept policies. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the Gaza Strip, where Israeli soldiers and Palestinian militants have exchanged some of the heaviest fires seen in the last 9 months. According to Israel, Palestinian militants fired over 460 rockets. 3 hit residential areas in Israel, but most were intercepted or fell in open areas. Israel also said that it's hit 130 militant targets so far. Medics in Gaza report that at least 6 people have been killed, 4 of whom were confirmed as militants. This follows airstrikes from the Israeli Defense Force on Tuesday, which targeted Islamic Jihad militants. The strikes killed 15 people, including 3 militant commanders. Now turning over to the United Kingdom, where its fertility regulator has confirmed the birth of babies that were made using the DNA of 3 people in an experimental technique. Announced on Wednesday, it's a first for the UK. Called mitochondrial donation treatment, the procedure is a form of genetic modification. It's meant to prevent the inheritance of rare genetic mitochondrial diseases, such as muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, and heart problems. It does this by replacing defective genetic material from a mother with a healthy version from another woman's egg. Only 0.1% of the donor's genetic material is used. According to the UK's Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, fewer than 5 babies have been born this way. In the United States, Republican lawmaker George Santos has pled not guilty to 13 federal charges at a New York court on Wednesday. The New York representative is accused of misusing funds, illegally receiving unemployment benefits, and lying to Congress about his income. It comes amid a wave of revelations that the 34-year-old has embellished his background, including claiming to have lost his mother in the 9/11 Twin Towers attack and that he had previously worked at Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. Santos has called the case inaccurate, describing the investigation into him as a witch hunt, and is refusing to step down from Congress. If found guilty, Santos could face up to 20 years in prison. And finally, Hollywood star Robert De Niro has become a father for the 7th time at the age of 79. The veteran actor revealed that he had recently welcomed his new child during an interview on ET Canada to talk about his upcoming film about my father. The 2-time Oscar Award winner did not reveal much else, including the identity of the child's mother, although his most recent reported romance was with martial arts instructor Tiffany Chen. De Niro has 6 other children from 3 previous relationships. His oldest child is 51.
Good morning. It looks to be another very warm day under sunny skies, so you need to take extra care when out in the sun due to rising levels of UV rays. UV levels will be very high everywhere, while ozone levels will also reach bad levels today. So use sunblock and hats and drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Western parts of the country will have higher daytime highs this afternoon. Gwangju and Daejeon will see a high of 27 degrees Celsius, so top ratings will be hovering around 25 degrees in the west. Meanwhile, regions on the east coast, including Sokcho and Ulsan, will see a high of 18 degrees, along with easterly winds today. Air quality will be decent in most areas, but some parts of the west will have bad dust levels in the first half of the day. But air quality should return to normal as the day goes on. Now, heat will subside a bit with more clouds moving in tomorrow, and rain is in the forecast on the south coast and Jeju Island from tomorrow night into Saturday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Federico Cuello. I am the ambassador of the Dominican Republic in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is the one channel in which ambassadors have a say. Ambassadors' opinions are taken into consideration. Ambassadors can promote what they are doing. I am truly grateful to be asked to speak for Arirang. I hope Arirang continues and Diplomat Talks continues as well, because really it is the one window in my 6 postings as ambassador I have found to speak about my work and to speak about those issues that are of relevance for the Dominican Republic and for Korea. And I look forward to coming back as many times as possible during the remaining time I have here in Korea, resonating with the world with Arirang.
입니다. 항 스탠바이. 항 스타트.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's May 11th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Xiang.
Top of the morning, Yoon. Hello.
All right, and Cheska Dainon.
Happy morning to all of us.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. We're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The first story, 4 teens in Japan were arrested on Monday after robbing at least 100 premium watches from a luxury shop in the Tokyo's Ginza district. The assailants put on face masks, threatened staff with knives, and broke showcases. They escaped in a rental car with a Switch license plate. While these 4 are being investigated, police believe there's one more suspect and are looking for where that suspect could be. Vietnam's Overseas Labor Center found that 23,412 Vietnamese have taken the Korean language proficiency test in the last 10 years to get an employment permit. This is double the quota of foreign workers the two countries agreed on. Data shows most Vietnamese want to land a job in Korea's manufacturing industry. Competition is fierce, with 3 applicants for every place. Moving on, recently, this wanted poster has gone viral in South Korea. A month ago, an unmanned store owner posted these wanted signs of 2 elementary students who stole ice cream. Though parts of their faces have been blurred out, the poster specifies the name of their school, which class they're in, and almost their full name. Local residents could easily identify who these 2 kids were, and netizens who saw this poster have been debating whether this was an appropriate measure or if it was too extreme. Now, we're going to take a closer look at the third news item. So these 2 kids stole ice cream and snacks worth around $12, and they tried to steal another batch a few hours later, but the store owner caught them red-handed. And the owner called the children's parents and asked for compensation, but allegedly they refused, which is why this store owner posted this wanted sign. The poster also demanded compensation of up to 50 times worth the amount stolen. To that, if you take a look at the screen, here's what a few online users had to say. Age doesn't matter. A crime is a crime. What's learned in the cradle is carried to the grave. Serves them right, but their parents should be held more responsible. Now, some were defending these children, saying revealing their picture is a bit too much, isn't it? This will scar these children for the rest of their lives. Now, what's your stance on this issue, Cheska?
You know, Yoon, I'm truly conflicted and ambivalent. I do agree that children must learn that every action has consequences.
For sure.
However, these are teenagers and the amount was worth $12, and they're emotionally sensitive. But to reveal the faces of where they live, you know, what classes they go to, it can inflict some pain upon them that might be unnecessary. So I'm ambivalent as to if there might have been a better way or different way to do this, and not knowing why the parents didn't compensate or why the children even started in the first place. Kind of hard to tell.
I think that's why a lot of people are talking about this issue in the first place, because they can't decide whether this was the most appropriate measure or not. But what is your stance on this, Yoon?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't think being neutral clearly helps to evaluate the situation. I mean, I'd like to make 3 points. I mean, first of all, it was an unmanned shop, which means it relies on the dignity of the shoppers to maintain a certain order in the shop itself. Second, the owner of the store first contacted the parents of these youths, who reportedly refused to compensate for the amount of stolen goods. I mean, the owner only then, instead of reporting to the police, decided to, you know, have a censored profile posted on his shop window. I think it's a very fair judgment as well. I mean, as they say in Korean, there's a saying that says, 바늘도둑이 소도둑 된다. You know, a needle thief turns into a cow thief.
Yes.
And it does, you got to learn about the responsibility of your actions. Third point would be juvenile delinquency and even hard crime is becoming quite a grave issue in Korea.
For sure.
Right, we have this youth voluntarily taking advantage of Korea's generous juvenile protection law, where you don't get criminally charged up to the age of 14. There were even cases of murder, and they knew about that they wouldn't get arrested. And I mean, with the spread of internet and everything, there's a lot of information, even when you're younger as well. You know about laws, you know about values. But if you're going to cheekily get around the social, structures, you should be responsible at certain levels.
But yeah, if I may, sometimes kindness could teach more lessons. Just let me put that out there.
Yeah, but I don't think they don't know that robbing is a bad thing. I don't think they're that young. They're thinking, oh, I'm going to take something without paying, and it's fine. Kindness means if the child makes a mistake, and that was clearly not a mistake. It was an act of robbery.
Both of you guys are making very compelling arguments, and that is why this is a hot potato on the internet right now. But let's wrap up our news feed for this Thursday and move on to our discussion topic. So every May 11th is Adoption Day in South Korea. It's a day to improve public awareness about adoption and push for stronger rights for adopted children. That's why NewsGen will contribute by taking a look at how millennials and Gen Z think about adoption through our panels here in the studio. Before that, take a look at the screen. The history of adoption in Korea goes back to the Korean War in the 1950s. The 3-year war produced tens of thousands of orphans, including mixed-race children. Since then, most were sent abroad, to the point that South Korea gained an undesirable reputation as a country selling kids as one of its main exports. With weak child welfare laws and public awareness, adoption was perceived as something that should be hidden or not to be too proud about. But the country soon started establishing more organizations and welfare policies for adoptees and adoptive parents. Officials aim to foster more domestic adoption rather than sending Korean children abroad. We still need more work, but one silver lining is that millennials and Gen Z seem to be much more open to the idea of adoption than their parents' or grandparents' generations. Today, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. What's the legal and institutional groundwork for adoption here in Korea? How far have we come to ensuring a better, safer adoption process? 2. How do millennials, Gen Z, and Korea perceive adoption? How is it different from previous generations? 3. How should the public be better educated about adoption? Today is Adoption Day here in Korea, and as we just saw in our video, Korea has tried its best to get rid of its notorious title, a country selling its orphans. And I guess designating May 11th as Adoption Day is just one of the many efforts Korean officials have tried to raise public awareness and promote better infrastructure. Here in the studio, what do you think, Seong? What's the significance and history behind this day?
Yeah, so May 11th, the Adoption Day, has been around for almost 20 years. As it was announced in 2005 by the Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare. The official meaning is behind the date 11th, right? Adopting one, which signifies one family adopting one child.
Oh, okay.
So 1 plus 1 becomes 11, according to the Health Ministry. So there's more meaning because May is also a month of family in Korea.
And as we've covered on NewsGen, we've already seen Parents' Day, Children's Day, so it's definitely a month to commemorate families. Then, Cheska, how far do you think South Korea has come in terms of adoption, and is the public better informed to, better perceive it?
I mean, I certainly hope so, and the fact that we're having this discussion today, I think, is a very positive thing, because there certainly needs a lot of talk and a lot of changes. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, in the last 10 years, we currently have the lowest adoption rate at the moment of 263 children in 2021. Domestically, we have 11,000 approved adopted children, so that's less than 3% that was adopted 2 years ago.
I see.
So there definitely needs to be more changes. And historically, Korea is a very homogeneous country, as we all know. So legacy, title, and name has been an important factor for sure. So there have been some internal challenges that Korea needed to overcome in terms of being more open to adoption.
It's basically, there's still a lot of culture and stigma against this matter for sure then.
Absolutely, and the stigma, which you mentioned, Yoon, has made it difficult for families who have adopted or orphans to speak about their family situation. So I distinctly remember some of the heart-wrenching stories of orphans actually being publicly made fun at school or being called out for being adopted. People asking, where's your mummy? Or like, why is your mom different from, how you look? And growing up in States, I'm sure and you too, but I've seen many adopted families.
Right.
And we talk about it very openly, and sometimes
it's more of a social norm, people get accepted.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting to talk about, so it adds more diversity to the mix.
And we learn about that from a young age, that families can come in all forms. But I think the South Korean government is trying to bring this about in the society as well. So what are officials actually trying to do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the 2021 data of 492 successful adoption cases. Cheska mentioned, I think you said 263.
It's domestic plus international.
Exactly, that's 492.
Right.
But that even is the lowest that's ever been for Korea since statistics began in 1958.
Yes.
Right, so looking back at the past decade, in 2011, we've had around 2,500 children adopted, which has been decreasing on average, but never as low as 2021. Many experts blame this temporary drop on COVID-19 related limitations, such as social distancing enforcement, sorry about that. Korea's outbound adoption began in the 1950s as a consequence of the Korean War as well. So until now, an estimate of 200,000 children has been sent out of the country for adoption. However, from 2007, with the introduction of new adoption policies, domestic inbound adoption has surpassed outbound adoption.
Oh, I see.
So that's quite a positive note.
It is really.
Korea currently has a number of government support systems for the adopters as well, such as top-tier free healthcare service, all medical costs for disabled adoptees, as well as cash support, education and consulting services for the families who adopt the orphaned children.
So we're seeing a lot more positive measures happen on this front.
Definitely.
But do you think this is because our generation has more positive views towards adoption?
To be honest, I don't think it's the case of just our generation. I mean, the older generation had a more positive view towards sort of adoption, as well as, keeping everybody in a circle. Many experienced the Korean War firsthand as well, with many orphans in the country, especially for the baby boomers and Gen X growing up with, genetically unrelated siblings, family friends, children, or even other orphans. Sort of a poorer but more socially generous generation than the millennials and Gen Zs, I would say. So let's have a look at some of the recent data regarding opinions on adoption. According to a 2022 survey, over 45% of unmarried people were positive about adoption. However, only 11% responded that they were willing to adopt even if they were biologically capable of giving birth. At 34.7%, the majority of the adoption positive respondents said they are willing to adopt if they cannot or do not want to give birth. This shows that whilst it seems that almost 50% are positive about adoption, it comes with a condition attached. 32% responded that they do not know at this stage, and for the remaining 22.3%, it was a strongly negative answer.
All right, then are there any other different perspectives on this matter then?
I think media definitely played a role in diversifying the spectrum of our perception. So there's certainly more positive because celebrities and influencers have been coming out, sharing, real testimonials about what it's like to adopt and go through the process, which isn't easy, we must admit.
It's very complicated.
Very complicated, lots of counseling, trying to understand the situation and actually adapt to it. But also, there have been some negative responses, as we all know, with the cases of Chongin adoptee, which led to the murder of a young child. So people are both very infuriated, but also very open and accepting as they get educated more and learning more about the situation.
I think people get worried as well when you hear about these cases, what are we going to do about
generalizing to think that all cases are negative, which is always not true.
Which is not the case. If you look at the stats, actually, people who go through domestic violence who are orphans aren't that really high.
Very, very low.
It's a very low case. The Chongin case, though it's very infuriating, is not commonplace among adoptees and adoptive parents. That's why they want to break through all these stereotypes and prejudice. And in order for us to do that, we need to see how perceptions could and need to change. And we'll take a listen to someone who's actually witnessed all of this right after this. To see how perceptions towards adoption have changed, we've prepared an interview with the founder and director of Life Together, Sarah Ko. Life Together is a nonprofit organization helping young adults who still couldn't find a family, as well as other orphans. So it's great to have you with us, Sarah.
Good morning.
Hello, Sarah.
All right, Sarah, I'd like to ask you the first question. Why don't you start us off by telling us more about how you founded Life Together and what this organization does?
Well, first, I appreciate you focusing on this topic today. My husband and I are both adoptive parents of two Korean kids who are now young adults. And when we moved back to Korea, my husband's a Korean citizen. When we moved back to Korea, it was logical for me to get involved in helping orphans and kids in welfare homes. And the more I learned about what faced them as they aged out, I heard repeatedly that the key factor for success was to have one caring, responsible adult consistently in their lives when they age out. And so that's how Life Together was born, to come up with programs and activities to build relationships. Relationship building is our key focus for Life Together.
All right. And Seoul, do you have any questions?
Yes, Sarah. I mean, compared to Korea, so you would know quite a lot about Korea as well. Your husband, you said, is a Korean citizen as well. How do people in the States think about adoption and adoptees in general?
I think we have a very different attitude. I read the statistic this week that 1 out of every 25 families in the U.S. that has kids has an adopted child in that family, which shows a significant number of people who have adopted kids. And our whole system is built around foster care, not institutional care. And the idea is to foster to adopt, which actually is currently illegal in Korea. You cannot adopt a child that you have fostered. But that's very common here with, I think this year we had 50,000 children adopted out of the foster care system into adoptive families. So we have a very different attitude, I think a much more positive and open idea toward adoptees and the whole idea of adoption.
Right, implementing foster care and actually allowing foster parents to adopt these children could be a really good blueprint for South Korea for sure.
Yeah, also just briefly, Sarah, do the foster family get sort of a decent sort of amount of support compared to the Korean adoptation system, you think?
There is financial support. I don't know that anyone would think that it's sufficient for everything you need to raise a child, but there is, yes, financial support.
Sure.
And Sarah, we're having a very active discussion here in the studio about adoption. Given the socio-cultural factors, Korea still has a lot of internal challenges of overcoming some prejudice and stereotypes associated with not just adoption, but about orphans as well. What can we do to change these perceptions to promote positive integration of these children into our homes and the society?
I think awareness obviously is probably a starting point. There are many people that I talk to in Korea who still are not even aware that welfare homes or institutional care exists. They think all the Korean orphans disappeared after the war. So just basic awareness, I think, is a beginning point. One of the things I like a lot about Korea is the very community and group-oriented focus versus our very individualistic society in the United States. And I think if that could carry over into the whole idea of adoption, it would be beneficial. One of the most common objections to adoption I hear in Korea is, why would you want to raise someone else's child? And rather than viewing it as someone else's child, as a community, they're our children. They're our nation's children. They're not something other than, they're not outside. And so focusing on society and incorporating them as a normal part of society, I think, is important. But help needs to be on all levels, from the national level, eliminating discrimination in job hiring policies, strengthening the support for unwed moms so the kids don't end up in welfare homes in the first place. That all is a governmental level. The cultural level, the media, what y'all are doing is wonderful to open the discussion, open people's ideas to think about it, not in a glamorous or romanticized way that the perfect cute little orphan gets adopted by Daddy Warbucks like in Annie, but a realistic idea of what adoption looks like. And then educational.
For sure, and I think that's what you've done for us today, Sarah. You've let us understand that in a tightly community-based society like Korea, we should acknowledge orphans and people who need to get adopted as our children.
Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you so
and
much,
I think
Sarah.
If we all can...
Sorry, due
You're
to
welcome.
time, we have to cut you off here, but thank you so much. We'll hope to continue discussions next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, we're now going to use this time to hear what our global viewers also had to say about today's topic. So take a look at the screen to see what they thought about adoption. Mark Fox said, I'm Korean adopted. I have 2 adopted siblings. I married a 1.5 generation Korean and we have 2 children. My adoption experience is very different than others. I have a mother who believed my culture is important even though she's of European descent. Min Margie Yoon Gi Sally said, we're 3 siblings. My mom adopted my younger sibling. The good thing about adopting a child is you give love to another one who's been abandoned by their biological parents. If I have extra money, I'd like to adopt a child too. Jiawei Ki said, I think most likely if I get married and have a partner, I would most likely want to have my own biological child. I would definitely consider adoption if I still don't have children and am getting too old to have children. Now, I think this is a good segue for us to talk about our final thoughts. How would you guys like to see South Korea's adoption policies go?
Yeah, I mean, as we heard from Sarah as well, and I mentioned before, South Korea actually do have quite a decent adoption support system like we have for the birth rate issue. But as Sarah mentioned, that was, I think, a key topic, a key discussion of the day as well. Having, you know, these adopted children as thought as our nation's children, you know, having a sort of community involvement in the adoption process, I think is very important.
I love that.
As I mentioned before, you know, during the wartime especially, the previous generations, the baby boomers and Gen X, we've all had, you know, the trouble with having no parents, orphans on the streets after the Korean War, and it was much more of a generous, welcoming society. And I think as we become more individualized, more competitive as a society, it becomes more difficult for young adults like us to think about adoption, even in the situation we can't even have our own kids.
Yeah, for
exactly,
sure. Even struggling to take care of ourselves, right?
Exactly. You know, we don't even want to have our own children.
Exactly. But how could we better promote awareness then?
I think awareness, as Sarah mentioned, is the key thing. And a quote that I kind of go by is, we become orphans.
Yes.
At one point, it's just a matter of time. So knowing
50-year-old orphans.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a matter of understanding that we're all in the same situation together, and we're not here to promote, you know, irresponsible adoption or to raise adoption in a hasty way, but as you mentioned, to raise awareness of acceptance and generosity, so that we understand that we're all in this together, and there are children, not just your children or their children.
Right. It's not about encouraging everyone to adopt, because it might not be an available option for you. It might not be
right for some people.
Exactly. But I think the motive of today was to understand that we need to be more accepting and allow more diversity here in society. All right. We'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Seong.
My pleasure.
And Jessica Dainhong.
Today was such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
New Generation.
K-animation, loved and watched around the world. We want to make more